Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another card video at my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to be using some brand new stamps and dies from Newton's Nook. This is the Cosmic Newton stamp set, and I'm also going to be using the coordinating dies. So when I saw this stamp set, the first thing I thought of was a Watercolor Galaxy. So I've done a few of these in the past. I'm going to do another one today, but I'm going to use a different watercolor set. This is the Koi Watercolors pocket-filled sketch box, and this is the 48 set. So you saw this in my last video where I did like a really soft watercolor background. Well, I'm still a little bit obsessed with this watercolor palette, and I still have it out on my work surface, so I'm going to be using it today as well. So the first thing I do to create a galaxy background, and I've done this in every galaxy background video you guys have seen, so this is probably familiar, is I do an underlayer of really bright colors. I do colors straight from the palette. I don't worry about mixing colors too much at this point, and I really just want to have some nice bright colors that are going to kind of glow through the black that I'll put on top. So I'm adding some greens, yellows, blues, pinks, purples, oranges, kind of like all the colors of the rainbow, and I just want to get a bunch of color laid out. This is going to kind of fill most of the space on this watercolor paper. By the way, this watercolor paper is some cold press paper from Strathmore. This is the pre-cut 5x7 paper, and I've taped it down to a board with some 3M painter's tape so that it will keep the watercolor piece flat while I'm working on it. So I used my heat tool to speed up the drying process. You could definitely just let it air dry, but I'm very impatient and I wanted to get going on this. So the next thing you do is a layer of really loose black, kind of almost cloud shapes. You want some areas where there's a really intense black, and then other areas where it's a little bit more transparent. And just to make this a little bit different, I've also brought in a little bit of blue into that black, just to shake up the color a little bit. So I'm dropping in these darker areas, and I noticed as I added these in here at the bottom that the black was pretty intense. So I did go back and add more darker black spots on the top of this. So I'm adding all of those in, making sure I have a nice variety of dark areas and lighter transparent areas. So after I had all of the black painted in, I then used my heat tool once again to speed up the drying process. And like I said before, you definitely don't have to have a heat tool for this or even a hair dryer. You can let this air dry as well. So then for the stars, I'm using some white gouache. This is from Whole Bean, and I've watered it down just a little bit with a damp brush. And then I'm going to use the edge of this acrylic block, and I'm going to flick the paint off of the block. So I'm just using a flicking motion with my paintbrush, and this gives me a little bit more control. I like that it doesn't have the paint splattering everywhere all over my work surface. I'm able to keep it pretty contained. So I splattered on some of that white to create all of the stars, and then I used my heat tool to once again dry that. So now I've got some more of that watercolor paper, and I've placed it inside my Misty stamping tool, and I'm going to stamp the image of Newton, the cat, in a space rocket, and I'm stamping that in some VersaFine Onyx black ink, and I'm using that ink in particular because it's waterproof. So I'm going to do quite a bit of watercoloring for this little guy, so I'm going to speed up the video and turn on some music, and I will catch up with you after all of the watercoloring is complete.
Wasn't I meant to lie in your arms here for a while? and I'm falling, calling. When I reach out, you will hold on. Was it a rainbow falling? Was it a rainbow falling? When I touch you, it will break through. Was it a rainbow falling? Was it a rainbow falling? I've been falling and I've been calling. Oh, was it a rainbow falling?
So after all the watercoloring was finished, I used the coordinating die and lined that up with my watercolored rocket. I used some blue painter's tape on the outside of the die so that I can hold that in place while I ran it through my die cutting machine. So it cut out that piece perfectly. Then I took the watercolor piece and I just trimmed it down so it was 4 1/4 wide. And then I also trimmed off the bottom. And my thought process with this was I thought I would have the rocket kind of near the center bottom of the card, and then I would give the top edge of this galaxy background a cloud shape, and that would give it a really fun edge. I didn't want it to just be a straight cut edge. I wanted it to be a little bit more whimsical, so I drew that with a pencil, and then I'm using some scissors to cut out those bumps that create the cloud edge. So as far as the card base goes, I'm using some Basil Licorice Twist cardstock, and I've scored that at 5 1/2 to create a top folding card. I then took a stencil from Newton's Nook. This is the Starfield stencil, and I'm going to place this over the top of the card base. I'm going to put it inside a box so that as I'm spraying, it's all contained in the box. And then I'm going to be using some glitter spray or glitter dust from Thermoweb. This is the silver color, and it adds a nice shine and shimmer to those areas. So I did open my window and I had a fan on for lots of ventilation, and then I sprayed this. You can see that sprayed quite a bit. I was a little aggressive with it. So if you use this, just make sure you have it in a well-ventilated area, and then get that stencil over to some water right away and use a soft brush to clean off any of that grit that's left behind from the spray and the glitter. So then I used my heat tool just to make sure that was completely dry, put some foam tape on the back of that cloud galaxy piece, and then place that down onto the card. As far as the sentiment goes, I'm using some vellum. This is some 40-pound vellum from Basil, and I'm stamping one of the sentiments from that stamp set in the bottom corner of the vellum. This makes it so I can cut off the strip when I'm ready. So I prepped that area with an anti-static powder tool, stamped the greeting in Versamark ink, and then sprinkled on some Hero Arts white embossing powder. Now you do have to heat set your embossing powder, otherwise it'll just flake right off. So I used my heat tool to heat that up until it was smooth and melted. I then put some foam tape on the back of that rocket, placed the greeting right underneath it, and then onto the card. So that greeting strip is sandwiched in between the foam tape on the back of the rocket and that galaxy watercolor piece. To finish off the card and add a little bit of shine, I'm using some Ranger glossy accents and coating the entire window area on that rocket. It looks a little bit milky and cloudy right now, but once it's dry, it'll be completely clear, and you'll see that in the photos at the end of this video. So that's the card for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. It's a really fun card using some new Newton's Nook products. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.